Where does a B-24 go when it disappears? In April of 1943, a Liberator named Lady Be Good lifted off from an airstrip in Libya. She joined a high-altitude raid on Naples, lost her formation in the clouds, lost her home field in the dark, and vanished. The Army Air Forces searched the Mediterranean for 2 weeks. They found nothing. They declared the 9-man crew killed in action at sea. The records closed. That's the story most people know. The records were wrong in one specific way. The crew didn't go down in the Mediterranean. 8 of them landed alive on hard sand. Their aircraft glided on without them and put itself down 16 miles further south, intact. Food, water, and a working radio still aboard. They walked the other way. This is what happened in the next 8 days. Look, most stories about a lost aircraft end at the word lost. A plane goes down. A search finds nothing. The town hangs a flag. The mother keeps a folded one, and the record stays closed. Lady Be Good has a different shape. She wasn't lost in the sense that nothing came back. She was lost in the sense that nobody knew which way the men had gone. Not the army, not the families, not the 8 men themselves. That's a different kind of lost. April 4th, 1943. Soluch Army Airfield, 12 miles southeast of Benghazi, on the Libyan coast. 25 B-24s of the 376th Bomb Group lined up on a runway that was mostly hardpan and blowing sand. The target was Naples. The Hatton crew had arrived in Libya 17 days before. The aircraft they were flying had arrived 10 days before. Both were new to combat. Both were assigned to the second wave. Things went wrong from takeoff. A sandstorm scattered the formation. Lady Be Good crossed the Mediterranean alone. By the time she reached the Italian coast, the lead formation had already turned for home. The Hatton crew dropped their bombs at sea and turned south for Libya. The return was at night, no moon, solid undercast across the coast. The aircraft's automatic direction finder was out. At 12:12 in the morning of April 5th, the pilot, First Lieutenant William J. Hatton, radioed Soluch and asked for a bearing. The HF/DF station at Benina gave him 330 degrees. The bearing was technically correct, but the direction finder at Benina used a single-loop antenna. It couldn't tell a true bearing from its reciprocal. The same number comes back whether you're inbound from the sea or past the field and heading inland. Hatton was past the field. The crew at Soluch fired flares into the sky to catch his attention. He didn't see them. He flew on. For 2 more hours, into the Sahara. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the engine started to die. The 9 men jumped. Here's where the story usually ends. The Air Forces searched the Mediterranean for weeks because everyone assumed the aircraft had ditched at sea. The records closed in May. The families got their telegrams. Lady Be Good was filed under missing in action, presumed lost at sea. Hold that picture for a second. A B-24 lost over water. A crew presumed drowned. That was the official frame. It held for 16 years. The first crack in it came from a man drilling for oil. November 9th, 1958, a British geologist named Ronald McLean was flying an aerial survey for Darcy Exploration over the Kalanshio Sand Sea, about 440 miles southeast of Benghazi and 59 miles from the Egyptian border. He looked down and saw something glinting on the desert floor. It was a B-24, broken in 2, but otherwise upright. The desert had kept her dry. Her serial number was 41-24301. Lady Be Good. A British petroleum ground party reached the wreck in March of 1959. The U.S. Air Force recovery team from Willis Air Base followed in May. One of her .50 caliber machine guns still worked. The recovery crew tested it by pulling the trigger. It fired. They pulled the radio out of the wreck and put it in the C-47 that had flown them in. The C-47's own radio had failed on the way. The bombers worked perfectly. But the part that mattered wasn't on the aircraft. The aircraft was empty. The escape hatches were open. The parachutes were gone. 8 men had stepped out of this airplane in the dark 16 years before, and not one of them was on it. The question was, which way had they walked? Now, here's where you have to stand on the sand with them for a minute. You hit the silk in the dark over what you believe is coastal Libya. You can hear the Mediterranean somewhere in front of you. North. That's what you've been flying toward for 8 hours. Of course it's north. You don't know the truth. You've been flying south past your home field for 2 hours. The Mediterranean isn't ahead of you anymore. It's behind you, hundreds of miles behind you. The wreck of your aircraft with water and a working radio is also behind you, just 16 miles back. You don't know any of that, so you walk north. Anyone who has ever been lost in a place they thought they knew has had a small version of this moment. Co-pilot Second Lieutenant Robert F. Toner kept a diary. He carried it in his flight suit pocket. He wrote in pencil. The first entry was that Sunday night. Naples. Lost coming home. Out of gas. Jumped. No one badly hurt. John missing. John was Second Lieutenant John S. Warovka, the bombardier, from Cleveland, Ohio. His chute didn't open. The 8 on the ground never knew. They never found him. The 8 men who landed alive found each other in the dark by firing their service pistols and signal flares into the sky. They pooled what they had. Between 8 men, half a canteen of water. A few candy rations. No map of where they actually were. They walked northwest. Monday, April 5th. Toner wrote that they started walking. Half a canteen between 8 men. 1 cap of water per man per day. Sun warm. Wind from the northwest. Night very cold. No sleep. Tuesday. Same routine. Wednesday. Weaker. Thursday they hit the sand dunes. The wind was blowing sand against their faces. Radio operator T. Sergeant Robert E. Lamott of Lake Linden, Michigan, had gone blind from the sun. Friday, April 9th. 5 of the 8 had stopped. First Lieutenant Hatton, Second Lieutenant Toner, Second Lieutenant D.P. Hayes, Sergeant Samuel E. Adams, Technical Sergeant. Lamott, too weak to continue. The 3 strongest, TSGT Ripslinger, SSGT, Shelley, Sergeant Moore, kept walking. They were going for help. There wasn't any help out there. They didn't know that either. Toner kept writing. Sunday the 11th, still waiting for help, still praying. Monday the 12th, 6 words about the cold. There were no more entries after that. Now, the old story, the ghost plane in the desert, is not wrong. It's just the smaller story. The aircraft is the easier part to remember. A bomber that flew herself another 16 miles on autopilot, landed level on her belly, and was found 15 years later with a machine gun that still worked. That's the kind of thing the Air Force writes reports about. It made the headlines in 1959. The trek got less airtime. The aircraft has a footprint in the history books. The men have a footprint in sand 85 miles long. Nobody marked it. The 5 who stopped were the pilot, William Hatton of Whitestone, New York, whose family had been told in April of 1943 that he was lost at sea and wouldn't learn where he actually died until 1960. The co-pilot, Robert Toner of North Attleboro, Massachusetts, 25 years old, adopted. The navigator, D.P. Hayes of Lee Summit, Missouri. The gunner, Samuel Adams. The radio operator, Lamott. Hayes was the one whose math, on paper, was supposed to bring them home. Desert survival experts had a number for this. On half a canteen of water, in that heat, men should walk 25 to 30 miles before they stopped. The Kalanshio gets to 130 degrees Fahrenheit at midday. Hatton, Toner, Hayes, Adams, and Lamott walked 85 miles before they stopped. Guy Shelley walked further. So did Harold Ripslinger of Saginaw, Michigan. Ripslinger's body was the furthest the search ever found, 109 miles from the wreck. Vernon Moore was never found. The desert kept that number, 8 men, half a canteen, the wrong direction. The aviation story ends when the engines die. The human story is what happens in the next 8 days. Look, I've thought about this story for a long time, and the thing that stays with me isn't the wreck and it isn't the desert. It's the picture. 8 men, in the dark, walking away from an airplane they didn't know was there, with water on it. They didn't know. The desert didn't tell them. They walked the wrong way for 8 days because the wrong way looked like home. The wreck was in the desert until 1994. Then the Libyan Air Force moved her to a base for safekeeping. Toner's diary is in the United States. The Air Force keeps it. They photographed every page. 8 of the 9 men of Lady Be Good have been buried in American soil. Their families know where they walked. Most of them. Sergeant Vernon L. Moore of New Boston, Ohio, is still out there somewhere, north of where the others stopped. He walked the wrong way too. He just walked further.